Okay, now that we have our terrain created, it's time to get it textured. Now the first thing you will have to know is that you need high-passed albedo textures, which basically are textures that are stripped of all the low-frequency detail or all the big details. For example, this shadow here, or generally speaking, the green area around here. And here's an example of an high-pass texture. It's basically the same texture, only applied with a high-pass filter. Now I have had my fair share of problems with high passing it myself, so instead I'm going to let the Lumberyard resource compiler do that for me. In order to do that, we will have to create some shortcut because we're using free software, we cannot use Photoshop. So we'll go to Lumberyard, our root directory, go into dev, go into bin64, go into rc, scroll down, find rc.exe, right click, send to desktop, create shortcut. And we're going to right click the shortcut, hit properties, and at the to the end of target we're going to add space / user dialog equals 1. Hit OK, and we're good to go. Now I'm going to browse to my textures. I already have created them, standard PBS textures, albedo, excuse me, gloss map, and normal map. And we will use the albedo first, so I'm going to drag and drop it onto our RC axis shortcut. It's going to take a while. And for the preset we will choose terrain albedo, and this will high pass it for us, as you can see here. Hit OK. And when we copy this over to our destination directory, we have to make sure to copy the export settings file also. Now Lumberyard wants the gloss map to reside in the alpha channel of the normal map, so this is our next step. We're going to open Krita. Let me just resize my desktop a bit. I'm going to drag and drop the sand normal into Krita. And I'm going to drag and drop the glossiness map into Krita and insert it as layer. In order to get the glossiness map into the alpha channel of the normal map layer, all we have to do is right click the glossy map layer, convert to transparency mask. That's all we have to do, and we're ready to save it under our destination directory. Sorry, picked the wrong one. Save as Lumberyard dev. We're going to use a samples project for this tutorial. Textures, terrain, and we're going to create a new folder. Name it sand. And we're going to save it as sand underscore ddna. Now ddna is really important because it'll tell the resource compiler that this is a normal file with a gloss map in its alpha channel and you don't have to set it up manually, and it'll automatically get exported correctly. Sand ddna. Now I had my problems using PNG for the normal map, so I'll just use TIFF, Why not do a lossless compression? Hit OK. And we're done with that. Now all we have to do is copy our sand and the sand export settings file. Hit Ctrl C. Go to our Lumberyard. Go to our destination folder. Textures. Fine. Sand. Ctrl V. Paste it in there, and we're done. Next thing to do is actually starting up Lumberyard. Launch editor, and I've already gone ahead and did these steps for 3 other materials. You'll see they get processed here. So we have something to work with. The steps are all the same. You just put the gloss into the alpha of the normal, and you export your albedo as terrain albedo, and you're good to go. Going to close this. Wait for the Lumberyard to start. Okay, here we are. I'm going to open our previous tutorial. And by the way, you could use GIMP, but GIMP in its stable version doesn't support 16-bit textures, so you either have to use the 2.9 development branch or simply use Krita. I think Krita does the job fine for this little tutorial at least. Okay, here we are. This is our terrain that we created beforehand. And the first thing we will have to do is set up our materials. So I'm going to hit M, which will bring up the material editor. Let me just dock it to the right. Going to navigate into materials, and if you don't have the folders, just create them. Or just hit right click to the materials folder and add new material. And then create all your folder structures, samples, projects, materials, terrain. And inside here I'm going to create a new material called sand. Hit save, and you'll see it automatically will put it into the right category here. First thing we all have to do is change our shader. I'm going to okay, a little bug here. I'm going to have to close the material editor and open it again. There you go. We will have to use terrain layer as a shader. Now with albedo, or generally with the PBS workflow, you will have to leave the diffuse tint to white, put the specular color to something between 85 gray and 61 gray, depending on what looks best. Smoothness has to be 255, otherwise your gloss map won't work. And inside the diffuse map slot, we're going to choose our our imported textures. So sand for the diffuse. As you can see, it's Highpassed, although the preview doesn't show that. Also, we're going to use our DDNA normal map. You can also check quickly if it did everything right. If it looks wonky in here, probably something with the exporting went wrong. I'm going to change this to a sphere. And that's it for the basic material setup. So next, we are going to make sure this is selected. Go to terrain texture layers, and as you can see, I already prepared some layers. And we're just going to add a new layer. We'll name it sand, and we're going to assign the selected material, which is materials terrain sand. Now for the layer texture, you want to use gray, so just leave it as default. It might not make sense, but it makes sense later on. I'll show you why it makes sense. So we're done here. Next thing, we're going to terrain toolbar and hit the layer painter. And as you can see, we have all our created layers in here, and we can choose the color which we will paint. And I'm going to try and choose a nice color, something like this. Let's see what this gives us. It's alright. It's okay for the tutorial purposes. Now I don't like the tiling. I think it's tiled too much. A way we can change that easily is we go into the diffuse map slot of our material, go to tiling, and simply change the tile U and tile V, and the normal map will update automatically with the same tiling. So I'm just going to use 0.2. That looks better. Okay. So I've gone ahead and chose colors for all the four materials. And once you're happy with the color and brightness setting, you just save the layer. It's important you save the layer, otherwise you will stuck with white and brightness set to default again. Make sure to click save the layer. Now, why it's important that you use gray for the layer texture is simply because the material will be the detail texture. So it will be shown if your camera is near to the painted layer. But if you're zooming back, you can see it changes to a gray. It changes to the solid color we chose, and this is because we used gray as a layer texture. If we had chosen something else, for example a tiling texture, you would still see some very ugly tiling here, and it would get better if you are near enough to see the detail texture. But if you're very far away and you use a tiling texture, it just looks really ugly. So make sure to use gray in your layer texture. Again, that's terrain texture layers, and here just leave it at the default. Does a good job. It's okay. Now, what if we wanted to distribute this automatically? Now there's a way we can do that. You can see here we have some tabs: min height, max angle, and max angle, excuse me. Now I've gone ahead and set the max angle, the min angle for a rock to 30, so everything below 30 will not be paintable with the rock texture. And I'm going to set the max height for a sand to our ocean level, which is 60. Here we go. And you have to set this up beforehand. You know, think a bit about it. What makes sense? What else makes sense? Then you close it and go to Layer Painter. And then you have to think, you have to go from lesser used layers to most used layer. No, excuse me, it's the other way around. It's most used layers, and then you paint the lesser used layers on them. So the most used layer will be grass in our case. I'm just going to flood it. As you can see, flooded everything with our grass texture. Next I'm going to flood with sand. And as you can see, we get this, well, it's not exactly nice, but it does the job. Border below, you can see it's actually sand. And I'm going to flood with rocks. And as you can see, it only applied to where the angle is greater than 30. Now, I think that's a bit much, so you probably have to play around with it. You know, just flood again. I mean, it's not exactly involving, so you can get away with doing it a few times. Now with the dirt, I didn't set anything to the dirt, so we can't just flood it, otherwise it will override our grass texture. So we'll just have to paint it manually. Now as you can see, you get really stepstones in your texture, and that is because the terrain texture resolution is not high enough. So in order to do that, we first have to go to terrain and hit refine terrain texture tiles. Yes, this cannot be undone. Okay, and now we can go to terrain and excuse me, let me just, oh, it's this one. And here we can change the resolution of each tile from 64 meters to 2K meters, I think it is. So let me just see, we're just going to change the resolution here to 1K. And the reason it is this tedious is because you're not supposed to do it everywhere. You're just supposed to do it where you will have your gameplay take place. So as you can see, I changed it around the crater here. So we're just going to look for this crater, which happens to be right here. And if I now paint the dirt, you can see it's a much smoother edge. Still has stepstones, that's because we still have some resolution problems here, but generally terrain is for big details. You know, you do the small details with decals and meshes and all that kind of things. Alright, so last thing we will have to do is, once you paint a lot of textures on your terrain, you'll see that your whole Lumberyard installation is going to slow down, and that's because this is all uncompressed data. In order to compress it and make it run fast, we'll have to go to terrain and generate terrain texture. Now the texture dimensions, you can leave them at the defaults, they're fine. You could go higher, you could go low, depends on what you prefer. Terrain color multiplier makes your terrain either brighter or darker. You know, if you find out you have too dark of a terrain, you can just adjust it here, excuse me. And high quality, we'll of course leave this on and just hit OK. And it's going to take a while. And this will compress it all into usable files for Lumberyard, so it can run really fast and doesn't consume too much memory. And as you can see, nothing has really changed except that we run faster again. Okay, so this is going to conclude our short series about terrain textures and terrain creation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Thank you very much.